Okay, recording. Okay, so let's look at the key points that we've got. Okay, so this is part 2.
Part 2.
There's an echo in here. Outline and assess the view random sampling methods are useful for studying social class inequality. We've said that it can be divided in terms of objective methods of measuring social class and subjective methods of measuring social class. The positivists would support random sampling methods because they provide data and sample that could be seen as more objective, high in objectivity because it's less biased. It's also seen as higher in reliability. Quantitative data is easily replicated and repeated. So with random sampling, you can get a larger sample of people. You could measure how many people have certain levels of income and wealth. On a bigger scale, you've got a bigger sample, it's likely to be higher in representativeness and generalisability.
Is representability a word?
Representativeness is the word you're looking for there, my dear.
I'm sure I'm going to add it to the dictionary.
Validity.
It should be there.
Hannah knows that validity for positivists means... What are they looking for to know that it's valid? Reliable information, yes. So if it's reliable, then it's valid data. With random sampling, you can get more data, more people can be sampled, and it's likely to have high reliability. Okay, then we've got critical points. Okay, we've got representativeness and generalisability up here. The mass population, more to approach, considering society as a whole. This can be applied to the whole UK population to develop cause and effect relationships. Patterns and trends. Patterns and trends, cause and effect relationships, and laws. Positivists argue random sampling methods offer this opportunity to develop a larger scale sample and those concepts. The interpretivists would be less concerned about a highly representative sample using random sampling and more concerned about getting depth from their research subjects. They argue positivists overemphasise the use of random sampling. They ignore the fact that it may be reliable data, but it may not be valid. The interpretivists are critical of random sampling because of generalisability. Why are they critical of that? Don't understand. Okay, so the point is raised that generalisability and representativeness can be problems with random sampling if the sample only includes members of a certain social group. Therefore, stratified random sampling can be used instead. Stratified random sampling involves selecting people in terms of social characteristics in different groups. So, for example, if we're concerned about getting the right kind of number and proportions of black, white and Asian people in our sample, then we can avoid only selecting limited numbers of each group by breaking the sample up into black, white and Asian and then selecting at random from within those groups. The interpretivists would be concerned that representativeness and generalisability in a large, quantitatively large sample is less important than depth from members of the group. So whereas the positivists would emphasise that it needs to be scientific, the interpretivists would argue this overemphasises the need for scientific approach, which is always going to be subjective anyway. The interpretativists would say it's more important to find out subjective interpretations from the point of view of those you're sampling. The social class inequality, where people think they fit in terms of class, may be more important than the agreed scale to measure them, which is seen as objective. The feminist approaches are critical of social class inequality measures, especially those that base the social class status on the head of the household. This ignores the private sphere of the home in terms of the role of the woman and her place in the home, because it's usually based on the occupation of the male. So feminist thinkers would argue that it's important to use measures which take into account the beliefs and feelings of those involved. This empowers the subjects, especially in the case of women and members of ethnic minority groups, who are often disempowered by a patriarchal, white, racist society, where research is male-stream, and the positivist so-called objective approach would be seen as male-stream because it focuses on male interests from a male, masculine point of view. The realist approach would consider random sampling to have benefits, and they would consider it possible for sociology to be scientific. They would be critical of the interpretivists for denying that it's not possible for sociology to be a science at all. They would argue that there are always going to be problems with the social construction of data, especially with social class, where social class measures may not take into account the range of factors, including age, gender and ethnicity, which have a part to play in inequality. Similar to postmodernists, they see there being a combination of factors that need to be taken into account. When looking at measuring social class using random sampling, the realists might consider this useful, but might want to consider a mixture of sampling methods. And so the idea of sampling triangulation could be used, where we use random sampling methods, but also non-random sampling methods, where we might, for example, select people to meet the aims of the research using purposive sampling or snowball sampling who have particular issues in terms of social class. For example, those who are homeless or benefit claimants, people who are at the periphery or margins of society. These members of society could be studied using unstructured interviewing and other types of qualitative techniques for which non-random sampling methods are likely to be more effective and useful. From this perspective, the positivist idea of random sampling may be seen as inadequate on its own, and it's important to use a range of sampling techniques to fully understand the social world.